Hello everybody and welcome back to Juno New Origins, where in order to further progress here, we need to acquire more technology. So we need to be doing things that are going to build us tech points, and these aren't that. So to that end, we can take a look through here. These are like 5 tech points if crewed. That's not very much, to be honest. So a lot of these aren't really giving us tech points. This one is tech points if crewed 10. So there's that. Okay, so I guess we could do like a Brigo lander here. 150 million, that should be pretty easy to do in theory. So let's hop into our builder here. I believe we already have a lander that is at least similar to what we'd want. Let's see here. TT lander. I mean, this is, oh my. I think we're just going to build something completely new, to be honest. So let's do a new craft here. And this is probably fine as a base. We can then put in a space capsule right on top of that. Put a druid into the space capsule. And then the space capsule would return with a parachute. We would probably want to have a pair of drogue chutes along the sides here. I don't really like the way that that positions at 180 degrees. Maybe it would be better at 90? I don't know. That's still not great the way that it rotates there. Interesting. Well, we could call it good. It doesn't look pretty, but it'll work. There's no problem with it. So that seems fine. Then we're going to need to have a heat shield on here, almost certainly. So that'll be for re-entry, and let's see, heat shields are under utility, I think? Wait, are we supposed to be using this? Hang on. I've prepared a lander with an engine and legs, but I need you to bring it to Brigo orbit and drive it down to the surface. Not that I don't trust you to build it. Okay, but we still get bonus tech points if crewed, right? Hang on, now I'm not seeing tech points if crewed. I accepted the wrong one. Okay, we can do both of these at the same time, though. So I'm also going to accept this one. There we go. And we're going to do both of these at once. So we're going to need to have the lander in here somewhere, right? And I'm kind of leaning towards... How do I want to do that? So the ideal way would be that we would attach it there. But now we're going to be lacking parachutes, for sure. And I don't think these drogue chutes are going to do the trick. We don't have any other type of parachute. So if we go into tech tree, do we have a radial standard parachute that we could unlock? We have insufficient tech points for any of this anyway. So that's not going to be a thing. Okay. So we're going to need something to drop this with. No doubt about that. And I want this to be on not mirror, but radial symmetry. I just don't like the way that this angles. Well, one thing we could try is we could put this on like 4 or even 8x symmetry and just use drogue chutes and get rid of the auto cut. So we could turn off the auto cut. I think there's a way to do that. Yeah, auto cut disabled at this point. So the parachutes would be 6. Is that enough to return this safely? It's an interesting question. It might be enough. We would need to test it. So to that end, I'm going to just look to put this up into orbit as it is really, really quickly, or not even necessarily orbit. We want to be coming in at a pretty high amount of speed. So I don't really care about cost here. This is a simulation. We just want to see if this is going to safely bring us down, right? So we would also still need that heat shield here. That is still a thing that we need. So the heat shield would go there, and then we'd have an interstage that would go here. Not like that. The interstage would go here. There we go. And then I just want a very powerful engine to lift us fast enough to get a decent simulation of what this is going to look like. We could go with like a Phoenix solid booster like this, and I mean, this is going to be a crazy thrust to weight. It'll burn for 4 seconds. Maybe not that. Like I said, this is a simulation, so cost is of no object. So we could go for something like... I mean, even something along the lines of this is probably more than good enough. Now, we might have heat issues on Ascent here. We'll find out. I want to just put this out on the pad. I don't care about inclination. None of that matters here. The only thing that we're testing is if this parachute solution works. Okay, so let's throttle this up. And let's lift this right on off. We're going to go pretty straight up for now. We definitely see that this is not ideal at this altitude, but I don't actually care all that much. We've got enough delta V to accelerate ourselves up enough, so we're going to do exactly that. Let's take ourselves to a 70-degree pitch. We're going to want to have a good amount of lateral speed. We don't want this to be just straight up. Okay, so that's 20 kilometers. Let's move this over to 45. Again, we might have an overheat issue up here. That's 30 kilometers. We're going to continue to hold here till about 50. Okay, so that's 50 kilometers. Let's drop this to a pitch of about 15 degrees. We'll hold here till 80. Okay. And drop this down to 0. Yeah, you can see this is taking heat damage at this point. That's understood. But we're going up to 100 kilometers, and we're actually out of fuel here. So that seems perfect, as long as we don't explode from heat damage on Ascent, which we're going to do. Okay, so we can pull this back, and we can fix that just by, like, putting a cone here, or even just putting in a heat shield. And that's what we're going to do, I think. We're going to go into here. We're going to put in 81 heat shield. Does that change our mass? Not really. It does a little bit. But it should be fine. Okay, we're going to relaunch this. And hopefully with that heat shield, that'll do the trick. So off we go. Once again, straight up here until we are in position here. Because we just need to be accelerated enough that we can do a decent simulation, right? Like, most of our deceleration is going to come from aerodynamic deceleration. So we don't need to be concerned too much about slowing down. We just need to be concerned primarily here about being in a position where we can test the actual landing system. Okay, so this is 50 kilometers. Let's put this at 45. We're going up fast. We're now at 70. Let's be at 15 degrees. Okay, we should be at 0 now. There we go. So now we're just going to burn here until the remainder of this fuel is gone. You can see here the heat shield is holding at 81.2 for the moment. Okay. So let's just lock this at velocity prograde for right now. Let's stage. There we go. We do have some parts taking heat damage here, but we need to try to flip this around to velocity retrograde. We see drogue chutes taking some heat damage, but that's not much heat damage. Again, we don't really care about this. We're going to come in at a different attitude. As long as we survive this ascent, we're fine. And it looks like we're going to. So the next thing that we need to do is get up into... Well, we need to get to a point... Yeah, we need to get to a point where we're out of the atmosphere, where we can position ourselves to face retrograde. Which we can't do right now. Now, in theory, we should be able to. Do we not have a reaction wheel in this? This should have... It's claiming 0 on the gyroscope. I think that's the core issue here, is we have very little here. Let's see. Do we have a gyroscope in here by default? Not convinced we do. That said, we are just kind of naturally heading around, which is interesting for sure. We're going to need to put gyroscopes in here, but this will do. The main question is, will the drogue chutes slow us down enough to survive a land or water landing? And that's what we need to answer here, because if that's the case, then we're in a pretty good position for this design. If that's not the case, then we might have some problems. We'll see. So I'm hoping this is going to bring us around to here as we enter the atmosphere. I think it might, but we definitely need a gyroscope in here. That's for sure. No doubt about that one. Okay, we're going to be entering the atmosphere as of now. So now there's some aerodynamic force acting on us, and it's pulling us back around the other way. Okay, that's rude. Well, again, the actual aerodynamic entry profile doesn't matter here. The only question that we have is, how are we doing on the how are we doing on the parachutes? Do the parachutes slow us down enough, right? So, at this point, I'm keeping an eye on the situation here. Max speed is 1 kilometers per second. Okay. Our aerodynamic entry profile might actually be a problem here, though, because we're not slowing down that much. We're slowing down a bit, I guess. That's actually, yeah, we're slowing down enough. This is fine. Okay, we're going to get the chutes out around 500 meters per second, I think. We're about 12 kilometers up right now. 11. Okay, 500 meters per second. Now. Chutes are out. That pulls us around to our desired orientation, and we can see that the chutes are definitely slowing us down nicely. Let's accelerate this up. The real question is, what is our speed going to be on impact? So they haven't deployed yet. The undeployed speed is 53 meters per second. And we're probably going to have to tune their inflation, but that's currently set to 8.67 kilometers. Wait, are they? They are inflated. This is the inflated state. Okay. So we're moving fast, then, for this being the inflated state. I don't think the drogues are going to do the trick here. Yeah. We're moving at 43 meters per second right now. This is going to be a problem. So we don't have standard radial mount parachutes. If we did, this would be easy. Unless we can change the radial mount parachutes in the object tool to be standard instead of drogue, maybe that's an option. We should check on that. But this is definitely this is not going to happen. We're 37 meters per second. We're not going to get slow enough. So we're going to need to pull that back. And a couple of things that I want to do. One, I want to come in here. I want to make sure that we have... This does have a gyroscope. The gyroscope power is at 98 right now, and yeah, there is a gyroscope in there, apparently. Interesting. Well, I also want to have some volume for gyros here. We'll make that be a 95% volume for gyros. Of course, we're going to want to have some solar panel on here. That is definitely a thing, but for right now, that's not what I'm interested in. So I want to check here. This is activation group none. Yeah, this is just a drogue chute. Okay. We could increase the inflated radius, though. So that could go up to 1 meter. Or no, that's the deflated radius. And then the inflated radius, we could increase up to 3 meters. That might do the trick. Right there. Okay. So we can run a test with that. The inflated radius I want absolutely maxed. The deflated radius, we're probably going to leave at about 1 meter, somewhere around there. This should be reasonably fine. Okay, so this is going to give us some better test data, in theory. Of course, this launcher that we've got here, this is not something that we're going to keep around. This is just a test article for right now. The question is, can we get a situation where we can safely land on radial chutes without having a main chute in this position? Because that will make things significantly easier for us. So let's move this to 70 here. There we go, and we'll hold 70 until our apoapsis is about 20, which is now. So now we're going to go down to 45 degrees and hold there until our apoapsis is about 50. So right about now, let's drop this to, I'm going to go to 15 degrees. And we're going to hold there until such a time as our apoapsis is, well, we're probably going to burn just the rest of our fuel here, to be honest. Although, we could definitely drop this down to a pitch of 0. We do have some parts taking heat damage, which is unsurprising. But there we go. And at this point, I want to jettison our fuel tank here. Although it's going to be definitely awkward. But that'll shield some of our parts anyway. Cool. So we don't care about our orbital velocity here at all. I do want to get us positioned over here to velocity retrograde, which it looks like we're able to kind of do. Emphasis on kind of. Let's move this on up. And the space capsule is eventually going to... Eventually, we're going to lose our engine. There we go. And now we're positioned basically retrograde. That gyroscope giving us some very, very solid gains there. Okay, so now with us positioned retrograde, we're going to have a much better re-entry. Our apoapsis isn't quite as high as it was before because we have a little bit more weight on here, but that's okay. I don't mind that. So let's take this up to 25x speed for now and just bring this right back in. And I want this to still be on 2x. Lock velocity retrograde. And now we've got this oriented correctly. So that'll be great. This heat shield is getting colder. Okay, now it's warming up. That makes more sense. I was very confused about why the heat shield was getting colder as we re-entered the atmosphere. I guess when you first re-enter the atmosphere, maybe that makes sense. Because when you're not in the atmosphere, the only way to cool is radiatively, and that changes when you first enter the atmosphere, but then that gets overwhelmed by the atmosphere eventually. So I guess maybe that makes sense to me. Okay, so we are currently down to 1.2, 1.1. We're down below a kilometer per second. Again, we don't really care about this deceleration curve here. That is something that we can adjust very thoroughly by changing how deep into the atmosphere we dive. That's not part of this test. So let's just get these chutes out. They are much larger now. And let's go to 2x. What do we got? So they're not deflated yet, or rather inflated. They're currently deflated. They're inflating. That brings us down to about 20 meters per second. But we're still 10 kilometers up. We'll shave off a little bit more. Okay. I'm assuming we'll survive at this speed. I'm pretty sure we will survive a water landing. I'm not 100% convinced we would survive a land landing. But maybe we just guarantee a water landing, right? That would be the way to go in that case. But a water landing should definitely be okay. We'll just continue to bring this all the way down, and that seems fine. We're down to 20 meters per second. We definitely would not want to do this in the mountains. That would be a significant problem if we were coming into mountains. The return trip question is, of course, how much do we have in terms of return delta V, right? Can we enter orbit and then choose where we come in, or are we just going to have to go with where we go? That's going to have a large bearing on this conversation. Well, we're down to 19 meters per second, and we will slow down 18 now. We will slow down a little bit more as we approach the surface, but keep in mind, if we land on land, ground level is higher than sea level. So we won't have quite as much deceleration. It'll be close as long as we're not landing somewhere with high land elevation, though. So as long as we're not landing in mountains or even foothills, it should be fine. We're down to 17 meters per second here, and that's still pretty quick for a land landing. Don't get me wrong. That might even be pretty quick for a water landing. Like, 17 meters per second is pretty fast. I was hoping we'd be a fair amount slower with these chutes at a larger expansion radius. But alas, we are down to 16. As long as we can guarantee that we're safe landing on water, I think I'm okay with proceeding here. As long as we design in enough margin in our delta V of our return stage for us to guarantee that we're going to land in water, right? That would be the thing. And we'll see what that ends up looking like. So we're still at 16 meters per second. We're not slowing down all that much right now, but we are still currently 3 kilometers above sea level. So we're down to 15 meters per second now. So this isn't so bad. This is, I think, potentially viable. I want to see if we survive this. I'm pretty sure we will, but I don't know exactly what the splashdown tolerance of these parts are. So we'll find out. We can definitely see that this heat shield here has 259 newtons of drag right now. It did its job, no doubt about that. So we're down to 14 meters per second, 2 kilometers up. So it's going to be a pretty slow fall, for sure. We could probably open these chutes a little bit later. They are intended to be drogues, right? So they open up high up to slow you down and get your other chutes activated. That's the purpose of a drogue, but we're not using them in that way. So we probably don't need them to open as high as they are right now, and we can tune that down to reduce the amount of time here. So that is definitely an option. We're down to 14, now 13 meters per second, 1 kilometer above sea level. Okay, so we're probably going to hit somewhere between 12 and 13 meters per second. We can see here, our vertical speed is 13.6. So actually, it rounds slightly differently than I thought it did. Now it's 13.5. Yeah, we're not going to get much slower than this. So it'll be about 13 meters per second. We're about 10 seconds away from splashdown here, and let's just see how we perform at 13 meters per second. Okay, splashdown seemed quite safe. 13 meters per second seems fine for splashdown. The major problem would be coming in on land. I think that land would be a significant difference. So that is understood, but I'm comfortable proceeding at this point. So what that, of course, means is that we would put our lander up here, but I would want to have, and this is going to be awkward looking, I'm going to want to have a fairing to protect that on ascent. So we can't put a fairing on here. Interesting. So the fairing is actually going to cover this entire section then. And would be something kind of like that, would be the fairing. Well, that's a little awkward. We'll put a fuel tank here, and I would like for this to be I'd like for this to be a pressure-fed engine, and Spirit engines would be kind of ideal, but I think we're going to need more thrust-to-weight than that. If we put a Spirit engine here, it is monoprop right now. I would like this to be a liquid engine with it being pressure-fed, and if we were to bump this size up to about 100%, what is this thrust-to-weight in vacuum? Starting thrust to weight of 0.05. So that is incredibly low thrust to weight. We could potentially think about quadifying this. So that would be something like that. We would need to probably increase the interstage size of this. So yeah, it would be something along the lines of that. That would be 0.21 thrust to weight, which is actually kind of better. I wonder what this would be over Brigo. 1.31. Okay. So that is theoretically viable, but we'll have to make a few compromises here. We're going to have to make a few changes to this. We'll need to design the actual lander component of this next. Well, no, we won't. We don't need this to land, do we? Hang on. What is our missions here? Okay, so we've got these two. We need to launch with the lander, and we need to do all of this. But then we also need to launch a new craft, start grounded, blah, 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 blah. I think we don't need this craft to land. All we need is to land this, and I think that will count for both. Is the theory. So how much DV is this? 3 kilometers per second? Noted. That's probably reasonably fine. What if we were to expand this radius to about 1.25 meter? And that will buy us a fair amount of additional space. So a 1.25 meter fairing will fit this a little bit better. And then an interstage here would, of course, need to be expanded out to be about a 1.5 meter, maybe even like a 1.6 meter, something like that. And then we'd have a fuel tank here, and I'd like to expand the size of this to 1.25, like that. We could even expand this up to 1.25, like that. Okay. And then we'd put in a fuel tank here, and this would be our primary booster, right? And then this could be maybe like around 15 meters or so. And then we would use a mage engine here, which would be an expensive engine for sure. But, I mean, the price of this craft is quite low right now. So that seems wonderful. We put this over Drew, and we put it here. There we go. We would need to increase the size of this guy a fair amount. No doubt about that. So maybe like around 150% size, or even just boost the throat size and drop this down to like 100% size, like this. That's 0.75. And we could do multiple of these. So if we did, say, 2 engines here, that puts that at 1.49 starting thrust to weight, which is not bad, actually. That's pretty decent. 3.15 kilometers per second here. We'd want to check our staging for sure. And I don't think we're quite done with this design yet, but it is past time to put a cut in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And next episode, this interstage is not going to go there. That's for sure. We're going to need to add another stage here. The observer lander would go about here. It'd be something kind of like this. Next episode, we're going to run a test on this and see if this gets to a decent location. If not, we can just add a couple of cheap side boosters out over here. That would be like solid fuel, and that would be probably more than sufficient. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Andy McGar, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Xenocyte, Hiro Marutsu, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.